Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction. That was quite a bit written there. I didn't write it. It was written by others. I just had to kind of approve some of it there. It's an honor to be with you all, it really is. And as was mentioned, yes, I born and raised in Lincoln, Nebraska. 9 days ago, moved to Texas. Yeah. Wow. What a reaction. Oh, come on. I didn't move there because of football. I moved there because I was actually offered a job by Bishop Joseph Strickland. And some of you may have heard of Bishop Strickland lately. He's been speaking out quite a bit. Back in November at the USCCB meeting in Boston, he stood up, and there's a video clip of him out there. You can find it on YouTube and elsewhere, where he stood up and he said to his brother bishops, how did we let McCarrick get as far as he did? How did we let this happen? We are better than this. This is not what the church is about. And he said more to that. He's a very strong bishop in so many ways and wants to really defend the faith. Now, I've given a battle-ready rally. I call them battle-ready rallies going into parishes, and I still do this all over the country, and we'll continue to do that work. I've been doing it for 29 years, and since the Battle Ready initiative began, as was mentioned, that's really been the main focus, is just, trying to prepare for the battle, body, mind, soul. And I'd done this event down there December 2nd, and spoke to a couple of gentlemen who were there. One of them was a friend of mine that I'd known for many years, and he had moved there to work with Bishop Strickland. And in the conversation, I just hinted, I said, I might consider relocating to the Dallas area because there's a Catholic academy down there, St. Faustina Academy, and I've given different retreats for them before. And they had offered me a kind of periodic, position to come in once in a while and do kind of mentoring and coaching for the young men, primarily in the school. And I said I was interested, and the principal had said to me, would you relocate? And I said, I'm not too sure about that. So I mentioned that to them in Tyler. This was the next day, in fact, because I was in Dallas one day, Tyler the next day. And they said, would you come down here? And I said, well, within 3 or 4 days, I'm on the phone with the bishop. They set it up. They said, we got a phone call, conference call. Within 30 minutes of the phone call, Bishop Strickland said, when can you start? And I said, well, hold on a second. I said, what are we talking about here? And he said, well, I got a Catholic high school, and I want to make it more Catholic. He said, the school's going to become Catholic or it's going to shut down. He said, he says, I had delegated the authority to other people. Things weren't going the right way. A lot of good things are happening there, but a lot is not what it needs to be. And I need someone to help wake it up. So in the conversation, I told him this. I said, let me tell you a story about Bastogne. World War II. Some of you might be familiar, not because you were there. I'm not accusing anybody of being that old. But Bastogne was surrounded. That's a famous story. Bastogne, Battle of the Bulge, 1944, December 16th, when the Germans, their final main offensive began. 6 a.m., boom, the artillery, the cannons, roughly 250,000 troops, a little bit larger than the population of Lincoln, hit the Ardennes forest. Well, Bastogne was in the thick of some of this, and it was surrounded by Germans, and the German commanders kept, trying to nudge the American commander to surrender because it was just a constant battle, but the Germans couldn't get in. But the Americans couldn't get out, supplies couldn't get in. They tried to drop, supplies in when they could, airdrop some supplies. And the famous saying, when the commander of the German army sent a message to the American commander to surrender, his response was one word: nuts. He said, nuts. Now, in today's world, they might use a different word, but at that time, thank God, it was very, very PG, very G-rated, in fact, his dialogue. And that was motivation for the troops. And these guys were surrounded. It was a freezing cold winter. They were surrounded. And their commander says, nuts. In other words, forget it. No way. We're not buckling. Well, while all this is going on, Eisenhower, who's head of Operation Overlord, the initial landing and so forth, and he's commanding a lot of the movements that's going on in Europe at this time, he hears from Patton. George Patton goes to Eisenhower and he says, sir, I can get to Bastogne and I can free those men. I can get supplies in. He says, it's impossible. He says, I can get there and I get there in 3 days. He says, you give me the troops that I need, you give me the machinery I need, I'll get there in 3 days. And they doubted him. And he said, let me loose, just let me go. And they did. And he made it in 3 days. As a sweeping 90-degree move, he pulled, and I won't get into the details or draw it out on a chalkboard here. But he got in there, Bastogne was set free, and what happened was it was the morale booster and the motivation. It was one of the key parts that turned things, and the Americans were able to push the Germans back. I told Bishop Strickland this story on the phone. I said, Bishop, you be Eisenhower. Let me be Patton. Let me loosen your diocese. And let's free Bastogne. That's what I said to him. And here's why I said it. if I'm going to work for this man, he's got to know where I'm coming from. Because I don't want to get down there. I don't want to have some song and dance thing on the phone and then get down there and he finds out my real personality and decides he made a mistake. So I told him from the beginning, look, this is the way I want to view these things because we are in a war and it's a serious battle. It's a very serious fight and it's getting more serious. And my friend who was in the room at the time on the conference call told me later when I talked with him later, I said, what was his reaction? He said he grinned and he nodded. And he said, okay, let's go. Now, that's what we need in our church today. We need men and women who have the attitude of, let's go. That commitment, that fortitude, that's something that says, we know we're in the thick of a battle. We cannot buckle. We cannot lay our sword down on the battlefield and walk away. But we also can't deny that the battle's going on. Something I want to read to you all, which is actually, I'll read it, and then I'll tell you where it comes from. Because it's a sort of thing where, you know how this is. If we want to avoid a lot of the mess and the chaos in the world, we don't have to turn on the TV. And you know what it's like. You know, you get tired of watching the news. We all get frustrated. You watch the news enough and you start getting, oh my goodness. I mean, God rest my mother's soul. She died over a year ago. Very, very wonderful woman. And she at one point had to stop watching Fox News because she would get so aggravated over what was going on in the world. Now, I know there's a point where we have to put things in perspective and balance things out, but we also can't deny what's going on either. In fact, before I read this, let me tell you this. A good friend of mine, Father Richard Heilman. Anybody familiar with Father Richard Heilman? He's from Wisconsin. He started an organization called the Holy League and very active in spiritual warfare, spiritual combat. He's a good friend of mine. We're going to be starting a podcast. Next week is our first recording. It's called the U.S. Grace Force. And he made it up after the U.S. Space Force. He's that kind of guy. He's fun. He's a lot of fun. But he's very oriented towards the reality of spiritual battle. So yesterday he posted on Facebook, and I shared it on my page. If you want to check out my page, my Facebook page is simply Doug Barry. My YouTube channel is Doug Barry. It's pretty simple. It's Barry with an A, by the way. So anyway, I reposted his post, and what he did is he took two pictures, and it's a picture of, remember, Leave It to Beaver? And okay, it's a picture of what's the young boy's name, the youngest? Beaver, yeah. The Beav, that's him, yeah. And he's sitting in a classroom and there's other students in line and his hands are folded and the photo shows from the side, his hands are folded, he's praying in school. It's a school situation, school scenario picture. And it's a split picture. On the other side, you see an image of one of the, very common now all over the US, drag queen story times. You've heard of this? Where you've got drag queens, men dressing up like women, and not just dressed up like women, bizarre. This particular picture shows 3 or 4 or 5 horns coming off of the head. The face, look, it's macabre looking. Reading stories to children. And you put these two pictures juxtaposed side by side, and he said, this has happened in my lifetime. And he's about the age of many of us. I'm 32, and so... All right, I'm 54. All right, so those of us in the middle years or so, okay, it happened in our lifetime. We have seen this decline in 30, 40, 50 years or so. From images of little Beaver praying in school to now drag queen story time. At Starbucks in Lincoln, they were doing this. And they've done this in libraries all over the country. It's going on right now. And so he points aside, he says, why am I passionate about spiritual combat and spiritual warfare? Because this is what is happening and it's in our face. Now, we can turn the TV off and not watch these things, but it isn't changing the fact that it's there. We can turn off the news and not watch the politics. It doesn't change the fact that socialism is growing in this country by leaps and bounds. Recent poll in the last month or so, 57% of Democrats are in favor of socialism, up from 41% within the last couple of years. 15% of Republicans claim it favorable to socialism. As we see Venezuela blowing itself apart with socialism, this is happening in our country. These are the errors that our Blessed Mother talked about in 1917 when she said that Russia would spread the error of her ways. Godlessness in general, immorality, destruction of marriage and family, not just corrupt governments, but everything that we are seeing happening in our country. I am not a doom and gloomer, though. I mean, I watch these stories, I check these stories out, I investigate this stuff. I've been speaking all over the country, talking in schools and places and conferences, and I've seen a lot of chaos, a lot of smoke, you could say, smoldering family and carnage on the battlefield of marriages in particular that are just destroyed. The pornography addiction, for example. Now we have opioid addiction. We have more people dying a year from opioid addiction than have died in the war against terrorism in the last 15, 16, whatever years. We are getting hit in the face with some of the most egregious attacks ever, at least in our time. But we'll just shut the TV off, play golf, and forget that it's happening. No, don't forget it's happening. But approach it from a mature, responsible position as a Catholic, as a warrior of Christ. There's a story of Stalin, Joseph Stalin. Under his watch, they say anywhere from 30 to 60, I've heard different numbers from different historians and different accounts, 30 to 60 million of his own people were starved to death by him, pretty much. And there's a scene, a story, a good friend of mine who heard this from a Russian historian, where Stalin is on the train and they're moving across the countryside and they're going through towns and villages along the way. And one of his aides is looking out the window, seeing all the suffering and starving on the streets as the train is going through a local town. And he says, "Sir, look at this." He says, "The starvation, the sickness." He says, "What's the answer?" And Stalin says, "The answer is to close the blind." And that's what a lot of us are doing. Now, I don't mean we're all turning our backs on it. That's what Legatus is about. Being an ambassador, as we heard earlier tonight, you know that. Young professionals, that's what you're about too. But what I want to do is try to rally something deep inside. That fighting spirit that no matter what we see and what we will see, and if anybody doesn't think it's going to get worse, I think we're not paying attention. We've got the blind closed. Because the trajectory of this missile doesn't look good. There are people out there who, and I've been in this work for 29 years, I've had so many people come up and say, "We're the generation that's going to change this. We're the generation going to change this." I'm looking at them saying, have you paid attention to the Marian apparitions? Where the Blessed Mother herself has come to the world. And I speak about these a lot. I'm just going to make a brief mention because I feel obligated to honor Our Lady. Because these are the messages coming from the Mother of God. And she doesn't do this of her own power. She does this because her Son sends her. And her Son sends her to tell the world, you're in trouble. In fact, Father Michael Voigthofer said to me when we interviewed him for our TV show Battle Ready, he said, "Doug, the reason she keeps coming over and over is because we are not listening and things are getting worse." Now, for a committed soldier of Christ, that's not a point of discouragement. That makes a committed soldier say, you know what? Roll up the sleeves, lock and load, gear up, I'm ready to go. Sir, put me in the fight wherever you want me to be. All right, whenever things are tough, isn't that when the champions step up and say, let's go even harder? That's what we're looking for every year with Nebraska football, right? And even last year, I'm still a Husker fan at heart, even though I'm down in Texas. But even last year, there was a point when Coach Frost said the season turned, right? There was a point when it turned, and it was when some of the captains and the upperclassmen in the locker room went to the lowerclassmen and said, enough! It's time to dig deeper. And don't we all hear those stories and just say, yeah, that's what we want. In business, that's what we want. In athletics, that's what we want. Well, that's what we need in the church. We need committed Catholics who will say, yeah, you know what, things are rough. Things are getting rougher. But you know what? Our Blessed Mother has come over and over and made it clear. And she has said, if there's anything you can be doing to help fight this battle, it's this. Daily, daily, daily. 15 to 20 minutes. I know that's a lot. That's a long time. I mean, 15 to 20 minutes. I'm being sarcastic here. 15 to so grueling to have to roll those beads through your finger for 15 to 20 minutes. When really I'd rather watch an hour of news or 3.5 hours of a football game or listen to this, post-game, pre-game, tailgate show. Because you know how it is, especially with football. We have to watch the game and then we have to listen to the 4 or 5 hours afterwards analyzing the game. And then we start to get prepared for the tailgate party 5 days before the next game. And all the, what do you think's going to happen? What will he be able to throw? It depends on how his left ankle is feeling. I mean, we break it down to what the quarterback's diet was on Tuesday to say I was going to play on Saturday. But we can only have 15 to 20 minutes for this to help bring peace to the world and avert war. In the 6 apparitions of the Blessed Mother in Fatima in 1917, a couple of things. There's so much we could talk about Fatima, but we won't. I was told I have 30 minutes for this talk, which is interesting. I told my wife, I said I have a 30-minute talk. She almost laughed. She said, you can't even get the opening jokes done in 30 minutes. I said, I know. Which I left the really good joke out, which I'll do later. So, what was it? Oh, the good joke? Okay. I have a TV show on EWTN called Battle Ready. Maybe you've heard of EWTN. It stands for Eternal Word Television Network. Some people think it means Elderly Women's Television Network. Okay. All right. I'm saving the best joke for the end, though. I really am. Okay. But two main things that I wanted to mention about Fatima. And she said many incredible things about in Fatima in 1917, which, by the way, experts, Marianologists will say that this is the first time that the Blessed Mother ever gives the prophecy of a chastisement and kind of names it, not the date, but she names it specifically. It's during World War I, which went from 1914 to 1918. And on July 13th, anniversary coming up in a few days here on Saturday, she shows the children the vision of hell, which we don't talk much about anymore. Maybe that's got something to do with our problems as well, as we don't recognize the consequence and the accountability aspect of our choices. She shows them the vision of hell. She talks about the errors that Russia will spread if Russia is not consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. And then she says this to them, this war will end soon, but if man does not stop offending God, there will be a second war. It will be far worse than this one. You will know it is going to come when you see an unusual light in the sky. And you can look this up. You could Google it right now if you wanted. Please don't, because I don't have enough time for you to stop and do that. January 25th, 1938, there was a red glow in the sky all across Europe, Eastern Africa, and parts of North America. Nobody knew what it meant. You can actually see the newspaper clippings if you go to the image section, if you search January 25, 1938, where in England, they cry out, they think the countryside is on fire. Windsor Castle, they think, is in flames. Ham radios stopped working. No one knew what it meant, this red glow from the heavens to the horizon. And Lucia, the only living of the three visionaries, was in her convent. She said, she saw it, and she said, that's the sign the war's about to begin. So our Blessed Mother makes very clear the consequences of offending God, which is really the root problem of everything we have. The socialism, the porn addiction, the marriage problems, the contraception. What was mentioned about the growth of the Muslim population, we'll compare that to the growth of the Christian population when we don't even talk about things like contraception very much anymore. And they say that 80 to 90% of Catholic couples are contracepting. You know, we're not growing our ranks. And as was mentioned earlier tonight, Muslims are. Point being, we need to be faithful to God. That whole first commandment that he gave to Adam and Eve about, you know, be comfortable and look for a good retirement plan. Oh wait, that's not what he said. Be fruitful, multiply. Be open to life. Life in the marriage and life in the world, procreation and so forth. That's what we preach like we should. So, Our Lady says, this second war will come if you don't stop offending God. But the two main things, well, that was one of them. The second main thing that needs to be pointed out here is in all 6 apparitions from May 13th to October 13th, where the great miracle of the sun took place, in all 6 apparitions, the one thing that she repeated in each apparition, the only thing she repeated was, when you pray the rosary, you can avert war and bring peace to the world. So the committed Christian soldier, the warrior, the Catholic warrior, when we hear about everything spiraling out of control and all the struggles, it's all lost? Of course not. Otherwise, God wouldn't be sending his mother, the Blessed Mother, to the world to remind us of how important it is that we turn back to God. Because while we are still going to get, punished, we're going to be corrected because as Our Lady said in one of the apparitions, another apparition later on, approved by the church. I only talk about approved apparitions. I don't want to talk about Medjugorje. If you're a fan of it, I got nothing against it. I just don't pay attention to it because the church hasn't made a declaration on it. But of the approved apparitions, she has said at one point, the world is to a point where it will deal with something because of what we have done. In America alone, how many have we killed through abortion that we can count since Roe v. Wade? Over 60 million? That doesn't count abortifacients. That doesn't count the numbers that probably aren't really on the books from Planned Parenthood. Are we going to trust Planned Parenthood's numbers? I mean, in all honesty, really, folks, face it. We have set a standard that is a bar that is very low when it comes to life, when it comes to marriage, when it comes to dignity, when it comes to so many things. So we're going to have to deal with something, but we can mitigate it, as St. John Paul II said. You can mitigate it with prayer and sacrifice, he says. Which is what Our Lady said after she showed the children the vision of hell. This is where poor sinners go who have nobody to pray for them or make sacrifices for them. So again, the committed Christian warrior looks at the problems and says, roll up the sleeves, grab my rosary. How else can I get into this battle? How else can I lay myself out there? for the glory of God, for the salvation of souls. Within the parameters of what God has given me to do, of course, but with my talents, my gifts, my passions. I'm not a businessman. I don't know what it's like to make money. I'm a speaker. I know what it's like to talk. I know what it's like to evangelize. And I'm built for traveling. My wife always says to me, you travel a lot sometimes. Yeah, I'm built for it. Father Mark from Life on the Rock we'd go on trips like this. We'd do Spain, World Youth Day, wherever. And he would say, you get stronger as the trip goes on. I say, oh, really? I just fake it till you make it, as they say, right? You just gotta, But in all honesty, I know where my gifts are. You know where your gifts are. We got to throw them out there into this fight. We've got to give more. We can't be looking at the easy route because it's too serious now. Now, if any of us want to turn our close the blind, I should say, to any of this and really think that Christianity isn't about this sort of thing, let me read this to you. This is what I wanted to read earlier. This dramatic situation of, quote, the whole world which is in the power of the evil one, unquote, which is what our Lord said. The whole world is in the power of the evil one, makes man's life a battle. The whole of man's history has been the story of dour combat with the powers of evil. Dour means intense, serious. Again, the whole of man's history has been the story of dour combat with the powers of evil, stretching, so our Lord tells us, from the very dawn of history until the last day. Finding himself in the midst of the battlefield, man has to struggle to do what is right, and it is at a great cost to himself and aided by God's grace that he succeeds in achieving his own inner integrity. Again, the whole of man's history has been the story of dour combat with the powers of evil. Paragraph 409, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Our existence, as our Lord tells us, the history of man, is battle with evil. Now, bring into this, 1891, Pope Leo XIII writes the encyclical Christians as Citizens. In paragraph 14, I throw out these numbers like I really know the whole thing. That's the part I remember of the whole encyclical. Paragraph 14, where he says, moreover, the Christian is born for combat. We are born for this spiritual battle. In other words, God has made us and given us the grace necessary for this fight on the battlefield. How it is fought, again, will be determined by the chapter of one's life, single, married, priest, layperson, religious, whatever that may be, whatever our gifts, talents are, our passions, our abilities, whatever. But regardless, we're all to engage in it. And at the very least, we can all do this. You can be 95 years old, lying on your deathbed. You can be paralyzed from the neck down. And in your mind and heart, you can still recite the rosary and engage in that battle. Or maybe you're a young professional and you're single and you're trying to get married. Maybe that's one of the reasons you're part of the young professionals. I don't know if that's, I'm just speculating. But it's a good place. It's a good place, right? Give me some resumes. I'll see if I can line some things up for y'all. No. I still have 3 sons that aren't married. And I'm not against prearranged marriages. So if anybody has any daughters between 18 and 22-ish, all right, my sons, I tell them, I say that, Dad, stop it. You got to stop that. All right. Anyway. But regardless of whether you are in your later years of life or your early years of life, regardless of whether you are someone of great wealth or someone who just has fire and an entrepreneurial spirit and you're ready to go but you're still broke, regardless of whether you're a singer or a writer or a speaker, whatever it may be, engage in the battle. In some way, shape, or form, you got to get in the thick of this fight. Because face it, the numbers aren't that big. Father Benedict Rochelle, God rest that man's soul. I was at a conference with him in Louisville, Kentucky years ago. Probably 15, 18 years ago or so. And this is a Marian conference. I've spoken at many of these conferences and been very blessed to meet up with some of these great speakers that are out there, like Scott Hahn, Steve Ray, Father Grishel, Father Bill Casey, and some of them I can call my friend. And Father Grishel and I got along very well, and I really appreciated his advice to me. And one time he and I were talking, and I said, Father Grishel, what do you think about what's happening in our society? Again, it was 15, 18 years or so ago. And he says, Doug, he says, the numbers of the devout are getting smaller. The numbers of the devout are getting smaller. And he says, and they will continue to get smaller. He said, but the people that are here at this conference, even though the numbers may be less than they were last year or the year before, he said, let's don't look at numbers. Because really, if you think about it, folks, you could have 1,000 people there, but if their heart's there, are they just there because it's an exciting conference and it's an exciting event? You could have 10 people there who are St. Francis of Assisi quality. Now you got an army. Now you got a special force team. Now you got some special ops, some Navy SEALs for God. It's what's going on down deep in here, and the commitment in here, the discipline of what's going on in here. But he says the numbers of the devout are getting smaller. They will continue to get smaller. But the people that are here at this conference, Doug, he said they still need to be fed, and we need to be part of that feeding. Well, we all need to be part of that feeding. Feeding the troops, rallying the troops, reminding them of really what is ultimately at stake. And again, in a couple of days, we have the anniversary of that incredible vision of hell that our Blessed Mother showed those 3 children. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been kicked out of at least 6 or 7 dioceses in this country. Told I'm not allowed back in again. Every time I say it, my wife back in my mind, Doug, stop telling people that. They're not going to invite you in. And Jim keeps inviting me back. But you know why? It's for talking about things like Fatima. I was told by one, yeah, you talked about Fatima and the vision of hell in a high school, and it bothered some parents, and they went to the bishop, and the bishop said, well, that's a little extreme. We don't want to bring that up. I'm not going to tell you where any of this is, but that's not important. But the point is, this has happened several times, and it's only for talking about things like the vision of hell. And it's not like I'm talking to kindergartners about it. Let me tell you, little kids, about hell. That's not what I'm doing. It's not that. It's talking to teenagers. And I have no problem telling teenagers, look, you're old enough to go to hell, which is always an eye-opener for them. What do you mean? Well, yeah, you're old enough to go to hell. You're also old enough to go to heaven. You're old enough to make decisions. You're old enough to make a decision whether or not to commit a mortal sin, remain in the state of mortal sin. Mortal sin, 3 conditions: grave matter, full knowledge, full consent. I know you know all this, but this is the stuff a lot of our young people don't know. So I bring this up to them and tell them, look, this is reality. The church teaches eschatology, the study of the final things. What is eschatology? What are the 4 final things? When we think of final 4, we think of basketball, right? Let's think of the final 4: death, judgment, heaven, hell. And we're all going through 3 of them. No escaping death, no escaping judgment, and no escaping we will end up in heaven or hell. And nothing goes with us when we die. Nothing. My weightlifting records from my high school days, I still work out, but you know what? All those records, they're gone. Old professional powerlifting, I used to compete in powerlifting. Old professional powerlifter from the East Coast said to me one day, he said, hey, Doug, you know those old powerlifting records? Yeah, I got some too, high school weight room and all. Yeah, you know what they become one day? What's that? Arthritis. All the quarterback days, your knees, your shoulders, we all know, they all go. They all go. Ladies, you understand that famous saying, eventually gravity wins? Fight like crazy all you want, eventually gravity wins. You might, all the surgeries, whatever. Eventually gravity puts you in the ground and there's never a U-Haul on the back of a hearse. You've heard that one maybe, right? All right, face it. We will stand before God. And the questions he asks us are probably not going to revolve around how many deals did you close? What were your record, in sports? Win-loss column. Let's do some comparison. How'd that? No, it's not going to be that. You know what the question could be for those of us who are married, especially? Number 1 question. For me, when I die and stand before God, because my vocation, my path to sanctity, my holiness has to do with the woman on the other end of this ring. The question is going to be, Doug, what's going on with her soul? What's going on with the woman on the other end of that ring? Nothing else matters but honoring God and doing the will of God. Nothing. This is the tough thing that the world has a hard time swallowing, though. So in our positions, whatever they may be, me as a speaker, a friend of mine, a deacon down at the school that I work at now down there, I'm only doing the school 3 days a week. I'm still traveling all over the country. It's funny because Bishop Strickland had said to me, Doug, I want you to maybe cut back on the traveling if you're okay with that. Maybe spend more time than I said, Bishop, I will do that to a degree, but I'm never giving up the ministry work by the grace of God. Please, Lord, been doing it 29 years because you might get reassigned someday, Bishop. The next bishop might not like me. I might be fired. So my role as a speaker, well, and again, my deacon friend of mine calls me a motivational evangelist. Whatever you want to call yourself, whatever your role in life is, I know that's what I have been called to do, what I feel called to do, along, of course, with being a married man and a husband and a father and a grandfather. Yes, I have grandchildren. Yeah. I know it's hard to believe when I'm 32, but it's true. But whatever your role is, whatever it is, do the will of God. Do it with fire, with zeal, but not emotion. Retired Navy SEAL put it this way. I love this statement. He said, in the foxhole in battle, you got two things you can lean on, emotion or inspiration, same thing, or discipline. He said, in that foxhole, you want discipline. Emotion and inspiration and motivation is kind of like an emotional high. You can get fired up. Maybe this talk fires some of you up. I don't know. You walk out, get in the car, within 5 minutes, turn on the radio, you'll be right back to wherever you could have been before you came in. It's that easy for us to lose emotional fire. Discipline is different. Discipline is the deeper commitment that says, no matter what, I stick to it. I stick to it because it has to be done. No matter how hard it is, it has to be done. You know, Father Lewis mentioned in the homily tonight, when he was talking about how Jesus called the 12 by name. And my deacon friend just recently down in Tyler, Texas, had read me this kind of humorous thing about the Jordan Better Business of organizations or whatever, sending a letter to Jesus saying, we have done background checks on the 12 that you chose. And I don't know the whole thing, but you can imagine it's funny. We found that Peter is quick to sharp temper and this and that, and we find that none of them have degrees or titles or this or this. It goes down the list saying we don't feel any of them are qualified, although we do see that Judas has some financial expertise and you might want to incorporate him. And it's funny, but it makes the point. Jesus picks the most incredible people who just do not seem to have what it takes. But as Father mentioned in the homily, he chose them anyway. He calls us anyway. He picks us anyway. And for whatever reason, we're all here tonight, part of the groups that we're part of, doing the things that we do. My hope tonight is that what I could have said here, I'm wrapping this up here. How am I doing on time, Jim? Am I right on time? Oh, well, I'm open for it if anybody wants. Okay. But I'll tell you this, whatever your role is, whatever your position is, I've said it over and over, engage in that fight. Start it off always with this though. If you're not praying a daily rosary, I cannot encourage you enough. And it's not me encouraging you, it's her. She's the one that encourages us all. Pray this every day. She's pretty serious about it too. Another point that I wanted to make about Fatima, Sister Lucia gave an interview in 1957 to a priest, and in the interview said this, in the 6 times that me and my 2 cousins were visited by our Blessed Mother, not once did Mary smile. Her warning in Fatima was not one of, hey, everything's great. 102 years ago almost, 1917, the Blessed Mother, 102 years ago, May, the Blessed Mother made very clear, the world needs to convert. So here we are much further down the line. And ladies and gentlemen, our role today is no different than the role of the apostles or the 72 that Jesus sent out or any of the early Christians. Take the gospel message out and do it like you mean it. Do it like you mean it. With a fighting spirit, willingness to lay your life down for it. I'll close with one final thing and then any quick questions and answers. If there's time for that, I'm definitely open to that. But I'll close with this. We know the story of the great saints, the great martyrs, those who gave their lives for the faith. We know that of the original 12 apostles, Matthias replacing Judas, 11 of them were martyred. They gave their lives. And they tried to kill John, but they couldn't. They tried to kill him. It must have really freaked them out that he wouldn't die. They exile him to an island. He receives revelation. Incredible story, right? For the first 300 or so years, every pope was martyred. Our faith is about soldiers, warriors, men, women, young, old, from every walk of life, from every background, every position, you name it. The wealthy, the poor, the literate, the illiterate, the artist, the politician, you name it. They gave their lives. But it all was steeped in deep prayer first. One of the stories that gets me the most is this, the story of St. Lawrence. You know the story of St. Lawrence, early centuries. St. Lawrence stretched out over a fire, like a barbecue, right? Like a pit. Fire, they're cooking him to death. They're cooking him to death. And at one point, true story, at one point, he turns to the guard who's there and he says, you can turn me over now. I'm done on this side. That's a true story. That's amazing. The grace that God gives someone, even in moments like that. But what you don't hear, this isn't recorded very much, but I'll throw this out there. It was what Jesus said to Lawrence when St. Lawrence came to the gates of heaven. When he met him there after his death, he said, well done, my good and faithful servant. I had to close with that joke. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor to be with you. Please pray for me. I'll pray for you. I'll be around. I don't have any questions or not if they're serious about that, Jim, but any questions? Any quick questions for me? Anybody got anything for me? Nothing? Yes, sir.
With the secular world that's going around us and everything, you talked a lot about the rosary. What else can Legatus members do? Is there one or two things that you would say that you expect us to do?
Wow. Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I do. Legatus has a reputation. I've spoken at several groups or chapters around the country, and the people who know of Legatus knows that you have position. Many of you are in position to make things happen and stand for things. And I say this in all, I guess, seriousness and humility. Stand and be ready to take the shots. Because I do not think we are that far, as we're seeing already in other parts of the world, and even things happening in America, of prosecution coming towards people who really take a stand on stuff. We've seen this with the baker, of course, the cake situation out in Colorado, the one out in West Coast, out in Washington, and so forth. Things are getting so out of hand. I was in Washington recently 3 times over the last year, and they told me the first time I was there, Doug, watch, something's coming down the pike. They're working on composting human beings, and they passed that law. Okay, so the people that are in positions of money and power, positions of bankers or whatever your situation may be, can put the foot down and say, I'm not getting connected to this. Now that could bring legal action. So to Legatus, I would say, be ready for that kind of stuff, but be ready to stand firm in those things. If you do have means, financial means, and you can feed the ministries that are out there that are really trying to fight this fight. I know a lot of people, and this is not a pitch for money, but I run a nonprofit ministry. And I know what it's like to do fundraising and plead for money. And be living month to month, or I jokingly say last month to last month, depending on how the month is going. You find good, worthy organizations that are really fighting the fight, that are orthodox, faithful to the church, fund them, support them, help them. I would say that too. Because I know many out there who stopped doing the work because they just couldn't find the funding to do the work. Radio stations in particular are an excellent way to do it as well. Jim's got enough money, he doesn't need any more, but... Those of you who have position and power financially, fund those ministries and those organizations that are on the front lines fighting like crazy. Be real careful where that money goes, because look, there's enough bishops out there. God bless the good bishops, but there are bishops out there, and I'm not trying to bash any bishops at all, but the stories that I hear, the people from behind the scenes, the stuff I know, and I know the priests that are here, you hear a lot as well. I mean, when I heard a bishop, and I won't say where it was out west, who put out a fundraising appeal to his parishioners saying, we need to raise 23 million. We want $1,000 from every family and 10% from every parish to cover the payout that has to go to abusive situations and priests and victims. And the parishioners were livid. Okay, I know people who've told me they're not giving their money to their bishops. I was at a men's conference in Pennsylvania area, out by Pittsburgh. The 1,000-page report, I'm sure you heard about that, and all that happened there a while back. Well, a gentleman told me in a men's conference I spoke at out there last spring. He said, I'm not giving my money here. He said, I'm sending it to Tyler, Texas, to Bishop Strickland, before I actually started working for him. Point is, be careful where that money goes, but fund those organizations that are out there fighting, because there are some out there that are really trying to lay it to the enemy. But stand strong in your positions, because it's coming. And I'm not the one that's saying that. I've heard this from the Father Bill Casey's, to the Father Benedict's, to Mother Angelica herself. She told me 20 years ago in a private meeting I had with her, she said, honey, you know how she talked? She said, things are so far gone now, the only thing that's going to turn things around is divine intervention. So you fight hard from where you are and get ready, because it's coming. We've heard these voices. Even the soon-to-be beatified Fulton Sheen warned us that things were going to get really tough. If we want to hang on to our positions and our success and our comfort, that's going to distract us from really standing firm and taking the shots that we might have to take. Myself, my wife was afraid I'm going to end up in jail. She doesn't want me to go speak in Canada anymore, for example. I got invited there recently, and I said, I'll go. And she said, Doug, why are you going to Canada? And I got invited. I mean, number one, the ministry could use the donation, but number two, most importantly, is we got souls up there. Let's go. I'll try to be clever. I'll try to be tactful. She says, you can't be tactful. Point is, we got to consider where we're ready to step out and stand firm, but that might be my advice. Fund those organizations that are on the front lines, that are doing good, orthodox, faithful fighting, and be ready yourselves to take the shots, because some way, shape, or form, it's going to happen.
Thank
You bet. I hope that helps.
One more question?
Any more? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so as young adults, we have a little bit more free time because a lot of us don't have families yet.
Yeah.
To participate in our parishes and high schools like you're kind of getting at, and like Legatus members have opportunities for mentorships in their communities. Like, do you have any like suggestions for like how to begin like mentorships, whether that's in a parish or in another organization, to help bring people to the faith and help enrich their faith through those relationships?
Yeah, one thing I would say first and foremost to all you younger individuals out there, especially you young guys, get in the weight room and train. And I mean that very seriously in one sense, okay? Because what we don't need are, don't anybody take this wrong, I'm not judging anybody in the room. We don't need soft Christians. We need gentle, peaceful, strong Christians. You ladies know it. You want the men in your life to be ready to take a shot if they need to, right? How many women want to be married to a man who's a wallflower? What you don't want to be married to is the guy you're laying in bed at night with, he's your husband, and you hear a bump in the hallway and you roll over. Honey, did you hear that? I did. What should we do? I've been thinking about this. Why don't you go check it out and I'll call the police? What? No, you're the husband. You should. No, sweetie, you're much better at negotiating than I am. What? And get Jimmy up. He can help. Jimmy's only 7. He's got to learn. What it should be is we men need to be ready spiritually for the fight in case, you got that attack from the world or the flesh or the devil, but we also got to be ready for that physical, natural attack. My wife rolls over, Mill, I should be this. Honey, did you hear the noise? Honey, where are you? I'm in the hallway, heard a noise, checking it out. If I don't come back, know that I love you. I've loved you always. Freedom! Shh. Oh, it's just Jimmy getting a drink of water. All right. Jimmy, the perimeter is secure. Shh. And then men, you got to give your wife the hero pose. You do that, Jim, don't you? You do the hero pose? There you go. Chest up, right? Shoulders back. No, I would say first and foremost, build yourselves, men and women, to be virtuous, strong, body, mind, and soul, strong character, strong, healthy individuals ready to go. Mentorship programs, you got to incorporate the things that are relatable. All right, sometimes we're going to do a Bible study. Look, I'm sorry, I don't mean to make fun of the Bible study idea. That's a very, 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 very small percentage of people who are already, to some degree, most of them are already going to be on that page. And that's good to do. I got everything in favor of Bible studies, no doubt. But I was doing self-defense training, trying to draw kids in through self-defense training. Because the one thing I found was no woman wants to be assaulted. So ladies, I'll put on a women's self-defense class. And I was doing this at my home in Lincoln before I moved down to Texas. And when I did my talk down there, I did a battle ready rally. I did 2 hours in the parish, and then we took a half-hour break. I went to the gymnasium at the school that I'm now working at. Didn't know this was going to happen. And I did a self-defense session for an hour and a half, and 150 to 175 or so people showed up. And the women were there, and they were excited about it. And you know what I was able to do? I was able to incorporate Scripture and incorporate dignity and incorporate God's teaching on protecting the innocent and work that in. It was a way to evangelize. So find things that are relatable. For me, it was self-defense type stuff, or I would do a youth night where I'd have kids show up and we'd pray the rosary, but we'd always have football in the backyard, basketball in the driveway, and refreshments, and we'd get 30, 40, sometimes 50 people show up. We'd do this once a night, do rosary nights, but incorporate something that's got some fun to it. But get a little, I don't want to say edgy, but get a little real with regards to, and I say that, don't compromise though. Don't become irreverent. When I say get real, don't become irreverent. Okay, don't play that game. Hey, we want to reach the kids, so we're going to have a beach party and kids be running around in bikinis and playing volleyball, and we'll talk about God. Oh, wait a minute. Anybody see the problem in that dynamic? Okay, but that's what a lot of people are doing. So don't compromise on dignity and reverence and beauty and truth, but get real with regards to what's happening in the world and how we're going to reach some of these people. One of the things I'm going to be doing again at the high school in Texas is, my title is Director of Catholic Leadership and Mission. The bishop came up with the name. It's a great title, but what's it mean? Well, I have to affect the leadership of the whole school, teachers, coaches, students. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to meet these guys, the athletes, in the weight room, and I'm going to start throwing at them my experience of weightlifting and so forth, and my training and powerlifting, and work that in. So mentoring them in that way. So find the things that are relatable, find the things that you're good at. Maybe it's a chess thing. You like chess, you're an intellect, and you're good at playing chess. You like that when you lit up on that. You a chess player?
Oh, no, she said robotics.
Robotics. Yeah, perfect. But you find those things that are relatable, and you help encourage people's passions and talents, and you work God into all of that. That's what we need to do. Let's don't separate everything out and say, we're just going to have a Bible study, or we're just going to have a prayer night. Those are fine. Try those too. But be creative. We did the rosary nights. We did the self-defense nights. I got different people at different groups. Some of them crossed over, but it was effective. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys have been great, and I thank you so much. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. I'll be around if you want to talk. Thank you.